I'm good.
Yeah, I'm good as well.
As well. Oh, actually, my computer just stopped for a second.
I haven't gotten it.
Right. Okay, it's back.
One second. It's fine. No problem. You can go. Good. Plan the Republic, the Indian Islamic Republic of Pakistan, also eliminate their nuclear arsenals. Colonel Ken, 18 security plans in South Asia, only solution to be completely abolishing nuclear weapons. Deterrence, only effective way to ensure the non-use of nuclear weapons critical to the Islam amount of time. Undiscriminated nuclear chain machine is essential to establish nuclear conflict. Building measures and arms control agreement should be encouraged. Indo-Pak war escalates and goes nuclear. Only elimination of arsenal checks. First preemptive counterforce strike. India would do despite NFU, but Pakistan considers it too creating user lose pressures as Persian Act 1980 defense minister already needs to hear NFU in the future. Depends on circumstances. Any counterforce capability would give the option to target passive nuclear forces using building accurate missile systems. Larger numbers also improving the ability to launch impact nuclear force. New capabilities in way to attempt to destroy Pakistan's entire nuclear arsenal. Once why will have preemptive striking nuclear with an argument greater flexibility nuclear option, but the Indian Pakistan have more than 7 go for massive. Second is Kashmir, long-running tension skirmishes and rapid escalation in conventional conflicts with CAR 19. Indian Pakistan are long-running incendiary dispute crossing confrontational threat of the nuclear war death scare and second of the world's likely to be professional. But two countries come to those made include the world's ever come nuclear war military skirmish or commonplace nuclear weapons to conventional military rise country conflict could be escalated nuclear change real motive one of crushing response spontaneous for the escalation beyond the leaders controlling the government of the world South Kashmir. It seems like this whole better delusion be escalating the conflict. Third, terrorism, major retaliatory strikes, hardline nationalism, and Pakistan's inability to come to the Indian army, making nuclear escalation inevitable. IU-18 attacks for justification for India's nationalist compression and Indian military response to Indian retaliatory attacks targeting only 8 terrorist bases. Also, Pakistani military facility escalation, terror attacks, and situation perilous. The leaders trying to lock leaders, helps for attacking and striking Pakistan giant terrorists, attacking Indian military camp, Indian army strike, Pakistani army who sympathize reaching dangerous force in Pakistani military on continued downplaying attacks in India strike. Will push Pakistani military retaliating force attacks on nuclear kind of fury and conventional forces with battlefield nuclear weapons. India will massively retaliate. Fourth, aggression, new imbalance and uncertainty, arms races, and international actors can't check. McDonald 19 is suicide covering Indian causes dispute with airstrikes using Pakistan versus the empire when nuclear power and the uncharted water questioning countries preoccupied surprising by two nuclear elements willing to States and enabling Western countries to intervene. Equilibrium is superiority set against your standard earlier with tolerating attack Pakistan and order to weapons strikes in Indian retaliation. U.S. lost credibility that led to end previous crises China relations form of great Britain by breakthrough U.S. and Pakistan's foreign future when the Taliban was full of suppression followed by Pakistan's developing bilateral nuclear missiles and the religious practical use of nuclear weapons. Pakistan government struggling to stabilize the economy. Fifth, Pakistani officials Article 370 controversy and deep establishment chips proved nuclear escalations like that 10-19. Pakistani ambassadors at Pakistan retaliating to with having killed the international court decision Article 370 Pakistan's establishment is starting nuclear war with people declaring genocide. There are Pakistan's must govern nuclear by reflecting why they held beliefs in the country's establishment that causing someone to advocate good ties with India years appears to be in favor of nuclear subordination because you're a moderate version of Pakistani nationalism. Pakistani sovereignty itself at a loss. Sixth, perception. Pakistani believe that India will first strike in Indian overconfidence triggers escalation. Pioneering 19 motives with India's carrying launch protection missile 6,000 intercepted nuclear without any alleged Pakistani police support. Terrorist groups that will tens of thousands of Indian civilians. Pakistan emphasizes building willing to use nuclear weapons at battlefield with India's superior forces. India's active radar imagery and can target much of Pakistan with LNC cruise missiles on India's unlikely capabilities from Pakistan near medium term communication such capabilities likely to accelerate arms race possibilities for strike major Pakistani early consideration for strike India over carbon lead to execute counter strike we cannot. 7. Nuclear submarines, strategic ambiguity, weak communication, devolution of command exponentially increase the risk of mistalk and accidents. 18. Pakistan decision to have nuclear weapons used Navy to enter response to India. Nuclear submarines can increase the risk of war control by triggering termite. Officers Pakistan test fire with submarine launching nuclear war, putting U-60 the chain of command between the risk of accidental nuclear war increase exponentially. See wars in this already been assembled. Communication are one of these submarines on almost possible to detect nuclear submarines advantage being able to fire nuclear strike and launch a devastating second strike once first nuclear launch being possible. For other strikes, the escalation but it's until the entire arsenal population centers. And nuclear war between India and Pakistan destroys the world. Johnson 19 nuclear explosions for insightful areas 36 million tons to block out 30% of the 5 week cooling decreasing by 30% globally. Indian China precipitation drops here in the United States 85% Indian Pakistan's over 125 million fatalities numbers behind in the last age of mass starvation. Extinction. Nuclear war follow creates ice age and mass starvation. Star 15 for nuclear weapons would be mass extinction event. Extinction is event of either finality for many years would be super cool in the dark river could be direct involved with his poison bladder 3 million subsequently destroy ozone block from including ice age for decades. Any nuclear will leave the earth essentially uninhabitable, and even in limiting nuclear war immediately kills hundreds of millions in 1 week. That's tuned all. 19 even one nuclear weapon explosion can do great deal of damage. 15 killed in Airbus, killed 700,000, 400 killed in Airbus, 2 million fatalities. The next population war with 15 killed weapons, fatalities. World War II war with 100 killed, roughly correctly killed 2.5 times as the fatalities occur in a single week. 8. Nuclear terror. High probability of nuclear terrorism in Pakistan. Past attacks and insider home proof that Shabu 17 catastrophic acquisition nuclear by terrorist organizations active public. Rogan 17 tackles by Pakistani Navy officer 4 persons will check the Al Qaeda. 4 Pakistani Navy lieutenant chronic distance in the Navy, harboring extremist views, led by senior officers who appreciation of all war procedures, and offshore diplomatic case releases scientific PMS will figure for serving commanders for arrested trying to flee. There was outlaws and much often within Pakistan Navy's commanders are doing marketing with Pakistan's army and for sure heads of the Navy instead of tax transport attack weapons from the inside terrorists and machine travel to Pakistan's nuclear arsenal. And Indian nuclear terrorism is possible too. Previous steps on low security without even an attempt to escalate that's taken 16. Any susceptible terror attack on the nuclear facility or the attack nuclear missiles create among eyes express interest in martial acts of terrorism weapons, mass destruction, strategy, susceptible vulnerable terror attack on the nuclear facility, BRT, moving by houses, seeing these weapons, creating attack of BRT, constant aggression like in 2002, new crisis, escalate rapidly, terror something dimension approved by train bombings, fester approved by eyes together, response to BRT, needs for order military attack facility, BRT, 2008, mom by terror attack, nuclear response to BRT, media reports from incidents from 1994, 98, not 2001. And oh wait, NFU fails. First, India considers preemptive strikes as defensive. Fisher 17, India consider preemptive strikes as defensive would make any nuclear more reasonable, favorable signs of strategic judgment are mounting. Two, officials would go back on it, and India implied it's only for signaling clarity in 1986, and if you found they're absolutely no permanent conflict, nothing would call on you to abide by it, then this official signal might give way to something ambiguous and might use first. Third, NFU's meaningless to Pakistan, they never believed it, clarity in 19 Pakistan, trust they never believed it in any way, the growing capabilities, the heightened interest, making more use and using for any can new often will be uncapable of bringing into effect action test search things and arms races, I'll send this after. Our nuke winter study is best rising under all is garbage. That's seen all 19 power storms. Occur when criteria met. The two criteria not met fuel is too small to generate power storm rising off by the charter location or fuel is burning golf course. Looks nothing like India or Pakistan. Fuel values 110 times smaller than the top 50 targets in India. Pakistan is clearly not a worst case value compared with previous studies. Coalition basic parameters that result to not be duplicated. The Western tries several planners that surprise vertical development, including stable boundary layer, a dry atmosphere, and short simulation time. There's no evidence for that assumption. Clean volcanic eruptions support the results of the erroneous Timberlake model to the aerosol process drove that sense to completely different physics than black carbon. They do not simulate firestorms in densely populated urban areas and highly expect they do not reproduce historic firestorms.
See next.
Yep.
First, who are Indian terrorists? Like what terrorist groups?
In India,
Yeah.
our evidence indicates the Islamic State, and also it doesn't have to be terrorist groups that are operating in India. It would also be foreign terrorists that have an interest in sabotaging.
Which foreign terrorists strike India?
I think our evidence gives the example of Al Qaeda and ISIS.
What have they struck before?
The Shapiro evidence gives examples of former Pakistani Navy commanders.
Shapiro's about Pakistan. I'm talking about India.
Well, those countries would also have interest in attacking Indian naval or Indian nuclear weapon shipments because they just care about getting access to nuclear weapons.
Have terrorist groups targeted Indian nuclear shipments before?
I don't believe so.
Why would they target them now then?
They have interests, and it's very possible to. Or actually, no, there have been previous thefts. Our evidence indicates that.
What thefts?
Examples.
It talks about like the Mumbai attack. Like how is this?
Like in those
nuclear
crises,
theft?
those weapons were very vulnerable to terrorists getting access to the weapons. Is what the evidence is saying. Which means future attacks, future conflicts could make them even more susceptible to being stolen by terrorist groups.
Okay, the Shapiro evidence. How do the terrorists acquire the nuclear weapon in Pakistan?
There are a variety of ways. First one that it indicates the most likely threat is the insider terrorist connection, which is where people who are in the Pakistani chain of command, when they use tactical nuclear weapons, they have to be shipped down to the battlefield, and the sort of people who would be doing that would have the possibility of having been radicalized.
So the nuclear weapons aren't like postured to strike India right now. They have to be shipped.
Well, these are the tactical nuclear weapons. They would have to be shipped down to the battlefield. Our evidence indicates that is currently going to happen in the status quo because Pakistan feels the necessity to strike first because of use or lose pressures, and they need to pre-delegate.
So they'll steal it when they're shipping it to the front line?
That is one of the scenarios, yes.
Okay. The Kashmir tensions, your tag and the evidence says that the tensions have been long running. Why is this a unique escalation point in the status quo?
Yeah, so recently, the McDonald evidence indicates that sort of what changed was India for the first time carried out airstrikes in Pakistan proper as opposed to just in Kashmir and just along the border, which kind of changed the game.
Do these attacks like escalate in the status quo?
Well, our argument is that in the future, because India did that, Pakistan won't feel the same sort of restraint in not like crossing into India, which causes increased likelihood of crossing the nuclear threshold in a conventional conflict.
What is the nuclear threshold?
Well, our whole point is that nobody knows exactly where it is, which means that both sides could accidentally cross the nuclear threshold because they don't know what the other side's nuclear threshold is, which is why.
Okay, what's Article 370?
That was a move for Pakistan to try to protect Kashmir and ensure that it's part of, or no, Article 370 was India. The Modi government saying that it was part of India and that they would have more control over it than they currently do.
Sending out the 1 and 2. Rex, I never got the 1 AC. Oh, no, I did.
You want to use this?
It's okay. There we go.
How many sheets?
3.
Okay.
Good, Rex?
Counterprotection, India should increase all immediately cease all airstrikes and artillery fire on Pakistani targets, demilitarize Kashmir, start negotiations with Pakistan over more long-term solutions, ban Hindu vigilante squads, set the threshold of Pakistan with regard to conventional nuclear fire breaks, cease counterforce development operations, immediately destroy counterforce capable weapons, mediate an international agreement to maintain the status quo with Pakistan, jointly have a public press meeting with Pakistan telling citizens that the push for war is over, share that it is not willing to raise the stakes over Kashmir, reconfirm its commitment to the NFU, seats at BMD operations and sell them back to Russia. Pakistan should cease development of battlefield nuclear missiles, stabilize its economy through reaching agreement with the IMF. Planks 1 through 3 solve the app. Brentwood reads yellow. At 1 you see Woodguard 19 cautioning confrontational put a 90 go war. Launch airstrikes by the Pakistani controlled cyber Pawankada province, exchanging artillery fire from Atlantic conflict and conflict quickly escalated. Modi has the choice to escalate conflict by deploying more jets in areas and territory. Indian government is thus so far the political will to solve the Kashmir crisis, to militarize the door, to apply the diplomatic effectiveness needed to negotiate a solution with Pakistan. North Modi being able to control preventing hardline Hindus and forming vigilante squads with the reason that threatening and killing them, thinking these defiling their religious convictions. 4 through 7 solve recent tensions. 1 you see Thomas 19. Governments don't necessarily maintain the status quo. India and Pakistan also believe that they can sometimes operate safely if they agree with Russell lies are all bets are off. India is considering developing forces that attack Pakistan's nuclear weapons preemptively. Pakistan could have incentives to go first. Citizens may be pushing hard for escalation. The last 3 banks solve the rest. 1 you see McDonald 19. It was the first use of air power in history by one nuclear arms power against another willingness to raise states. Modi decided that the gains of strategic obtain are no longer worth the tax practice and is developing battlefield nuclear missiles. Modi could most of the law show taking a tough line to stabilize the economy and reach agreement with the International Monetary Fund. More evidence, Chris Zanak 19. India has strictly adhered to the doctrine of no nuclear first use counterforce capability to give India option to target Pakistan's nuclear forces. Next up, imminent economic crisis means large-scale economic reforms are coming out to bypass latent political resistance, but only if political was concentrated on the crisis. The Hija 12.1. Good economic times reduce instruments and policymakers who choose to defer politically difficult reforms and fail or embark upon economic reforms and need and further reforms seem to suggest continuation of gradual supposed starting Modi's second term. However, tepid growth numbers have given a new impetus to reform agenda. All the burden falls on structural rather than cyclical factors explaining economic slowdown. The other remedy is to re-energize the economy reforms agenda. Continued domestic and political support is dependent on aggressive foreign policy posture, especially with news against Pakistan that's Panda 19. Modi's repeated references to nuclear dynamics at election addresses rallies Modi's we have the nuclear bombs promising they would retaliate. These underscores the extent to which national DGP is learning our national security credential to create a British BGP has rightly decided to focus on expanding national security defense, economic downturn, projects public health causes disease, Sinek Gupta 19. Healthcare is in dire need of funds from primary healthcare centers when the economy is growing at a low rate. It is also regarding more middle effect health of India, shortage of hospital beds, out of pocket expenditures, high cost of drugs, and quality labor force comes from absenteeism due to illness is bad for production because it means a lot of loss of wages for laborers with market jobs shrinking. People have less resources spent on healthcare. Diseases, non-linear existential risks encompasses and outweighs all of the threats common in Omicron 15. Diseases have been the greatest cause of mortality in history. The majority will die from single largest pandemics that will have greater probability than usually assumed. All features already exist in nature, incurable, fatal, extremely infectious, and the long incubation periods of pathogen combined. These successful will be extreme. Next up. Counterplan text India and Pakistan should eliminate their nuclear arsenals except for Pakistan's tactical nuclear weapons sufficiency framing. TNWs kill 20 people large scale. Conventional war outweighs can all is 16. Low casualty rates are minimal, material damage if TNWs are employed. Simple calculation are revealing a reasonable assumption would be the civilian population would have been evacuated. Initial casualties within the range of 20-30 personnel killed or wounded in a bridge headed adversary troops within context of Indian troops is much less likely target. Nukes are key to deter large scale conventional conflict, terrorism, and accidents are on Ganguli 14. In South Asia, it's done away with the prospect of full-scale nuclear war. Risks are so great that neither side can seriously contemplate starting war. With the same is true of Sino-Indian relationship with Chinese, but the likelihood of escalating is non-existent in Pakistan as long as the non-state actors prefer nuclearization. His perspective overlooks a vast history. Nuclearization may have been to Pakistan, but not lead to initiation of Pakistan military use nuclear weapons as casualties considered last resort. They're not about to let them slip out of their grasp. There's danger in extrapolating the American-Soviet experiences. In those cases, the weapons are tightly coupled in South Asia. You have relatively small arsenals and capabilities primarily for deterrence. TNW is good, deters conventional war. I'm at 16. It would be irrational to unnecessarily pose an hazard to any situation where loss of control, inadequate field security, or weakened, and human might make a vulnerable preemptive attack actions seems to content to use natural force and batting rather than a weapon for warfighting. Ambiguity can complicate the security context for India when and how Pakistan uses will depend on evolving shape of battle and decided by NCA without delegating all of authorities. Field commanders, Pakistani planners have chosen to plug this perceived difference gap by TNWs while simultaneously tackling missile gaps in conventional forces where possible. Emergency asymmetries will contribute to India's false sense of superiority to the underlying driver of generating greater lower conflict to increase costs with limited conventional warfare. That limited war by India would be total war for Pakistan. TNWs to be a cross effective and quick solution. Conventional war outweighs new tech results in countless deaths. Divorcee 12. The next global conventional war will be neo-apocalyptic and scale the degree of human suffering that would be unleashed would easily surpass anything they came before. Combatants using killing machines, weaponized nanotechnology, they could use to unleash chemical biological agents that would result in countless deaths. The case. Pakistan will only disarm if conventional forces are balanced. Its sovereignty deficit in case turn, and Pakistan hinders negotiation in order to re-proliferate. Now, year 8. Pakistan always expressed concerns about asymmetry between India and South Asia. It regards nukes as it means to offset asymmetry in conventional weapons. Thus, beyond disarmament, Pakistan wants to balance conventional forces. Pakistan laid out goals for negotiations lists if you're remaining disadvantage. One can discern a desire to offset disadvantage by back time to mass disease or arsenal to keep nuke, cut the card, and nuke. This durable fiat doesn't solve theirs. Possessive, which means the resolutely fiat states that doesn't currently have nukes. Mirror Mubster there is relating to as possessors. Durable fiat just means that the action can't be reversed. Not that it happens multiple times. Any states that eliminate nuclear weapons can't rearm. But fiat doesn't solve the states are arming for the first time. No durable fiat, non-world. One states have they'll always possess the knowledge to rearm. The plan can eliminate that. The real debate about nuclear disarmament is about countries verifying full elimination. The topical is about policies like NFU and D-alert. The idea you can plow through the biggest controversy on the topic is still a definition of eliminating. It won't be permanent, just complete. That still allows rearmament of new terror. Pakistan nukes are secure. Resolving 19. Pakistan nuclear weapons are short far from the frontier. 10. Taliban 10 weapons, troops, and intel personnel guard the weapons. Weapons are only armed appropriate code at the last moment, preventing a rogue nuke scenario. Also, no attacks on Indian nuclear weapons. Their evidence only indicates they can get very low plutonium materials, not the actual nuclear weapon. India has vast protections. The card is referencing the Mumbai terror attacks, not the terrorists would steal nuclear weapons, and no Pakistan stealing no Pakistan stealing TMWs. They have the resources and the guards to protect them. They would go with them when they transfer to the battlefield. No impact war. Gangly 19. History suggests optimism during cargo war. India worked with Canadian fighting in the war concluded number of nuclear escalation less than 2 years since despite the USC helped use census by urging both sides to start talking about the nuclear states of class without resulting in nuclear weapons. Pakistan's military is not irrational mode. He understands the risk of escalation as appropriate, but when Indian military nuclear weapons destructive power is so great the states understand the awful consequences. Underscore dangers. Cut the card of dangers.
Where is that last one, Mark?
Dangers. Underscore the dangers.
Good.
Yeah.
Status of the counterplans.
Condition.
Can you pick planks?
No.
So the first counterplan says that India mediates an international agreement to maintain the status quo with Pakistan. What is the status quo with Pakistan?
Not a nuclear war.
So I guess what does that international agreement look like, and what incentive does India have to mediate fairly?
To not start a nuclear war is their incentive to mediate fairly, and I don't know like the specifics of what it would entail, but it would definitely entail like de-escalation and not having nukes like not having the tensions in the status quo.
Counterplan, what are tactical nuclear weapons?
Weapons that are used in a conventional war, that they're like 15 grade plutonium, so used for like tactical purposes.
Wait, so 15 kiloton bombs?
Yes.
Cool. What's the warrant for why they only killed 20 to 30? It seems like your card just asserts that.
it says the area would already be cleared out in the instance of war, and like the radiation and impact of the bomb like wouldn't like.
I guess if it
cause
only
nuclear winter.
kills 20 people, why does it deter India?
Because it's really effective at destroying their tanks. Like it could destroy like 80 like if the tanks were rolling
What
out, it could
evidence do you
destroy
have
80 of
that
them.
says like Indian tanks are like the only thing that they care about in conventional wars?
It's not the only thing they care about, but it's like a really good deterrent. In the unhighlighted, in the Ahmed evidence, it has
Indian
words about.
On the case page, you
vehicles.
said that Pakistan won't give up nukes unless they have conventional equilibrium. What evidence do you have that says they don't have conventional equilibrium in the status quo?
It's in the case. In your case evidence, it says that
Where? What evidence?
You asked me a question. It's McDonald evidence, new unbalance, uncertainty.
Where does it, like, I'm just confused where the app says that Pakistan doesn't have the same, or doesn't have the same conventional capabilities as India.
Here, the Ayub evidence, Pakistan's inability to counter the Indian army make nuclear escalation inevitable.
Which
It's like
piece
the
of
tag
evidence
of
says
the
that?
cart. The Ayub evidence, the tag of the cart. Pakistan's inability to counter the Indian army.
They said, what are the net benefits to the first counterplan?
The DISAD.
Just the DISAD?
Yes.
Where does your serum gut the evidence say disease?
It talks about illnesses, like,
So like people don't work because they're sick, how does that cause disease?
it causes mass spread of illness, which, I mean, disease and illness are synonyms.
case counter, or the advantage counter plan, the disadvantage, the pick. It was sent, let me know when it's ready.
Alright, can you try setting it again for me? Oh, it doesn't, it comes up when you send it the second time for some reason. That happened with the 1AC too.
Oh, we don't remember when it's ready. Everyone good? Cool.
Conceded submarine scenario, lack of communication means paranoid Pakistani commanders are likely to start an accidental nuclear war because they won't know what's going on about them. The limelight. They conceded that the plan would include confidence building measures and arms control agreements. Our evidence is from 10 years, post-dates evidence by 10 years, and is from a PhD who works at a university in Pakistan who obviously knows more about the issue. They get to the warrant in their card. It just says Pakistan is sad about not having the same conventional forces, but doesn't say anything about them not disarming, which means they don't get access to any of their dual Wolfia arguments. Regardless, their Wolfia is good, it's necessary. Otherwise, the negative would win every single debate. These obviously countries have incentives to keep nuclear weapons, which is why they have an incentive close to the app would never be able to answer in the debate should be about whether or not nukes should get eliminated. But if they win their Wolfia that takes out solvency for the pig fees, it means if Pakistan was able to maintain TNWs, that would mean that India would obviously want to redevelop their nuclear weapons. They can believe evidence does is about just about history, which doesn't assume our submarine scenario, which is much more recent. The counterplan. Conditionalities voting sheet first Trotsky splits one error reports me arguments both worlds to different unique fixed condition, which includes state advantage strategic interaction and contradiction. Second is clash incentivizing reading many short aptitudes to go to the least covered one, which means one error response to scope gain on persistence nuances always means external education both around self education. In fact, the clash only occurs in around third dispo solve taking people we make a kernel less efficient and flexibility between one error strategic decision making permutation with the counterplan links to the dissent NFU improving relations everything that's in the counterplan text all hurt Modi strongman leader image these no longer able to nationally project against Pakistan, which is what their link evidence is about. They conceded NFU fails from the case because India considers defensive and Pakistan doesn't legal, which means Pakistan would still have an incentive to use first. Their planks contradict. They said reach an agreement to maintain the status quo, but the rest of the planks are about changing a bunch of other stuff from the status quo. Hold them to the counterplan text. It's the reason to reject the entire counterplan because they said they can't keep planks and it affects the entirety of the one-year strategy against the dissent. This dissent is garbage. If I win any of these arguments, it means the dissent has zero risk because they're just straight up missing a bunch of internal links. 8 point, no uniqueness. It's normative, not descriptive. The author's personal views that government should pass economic reforms, not that they actually will. And it says the Modi government is Keynesian, which favors limited reform. The evidence also has zero author qualifications, which means they have no basis for saying one program can solve the entirety of the Indian economy. B point, no link. It just says Modi talks about nukes a lot, not that the public actually cares. And it doesn't assume bilateral disarmament, which would eliminate the need for Indian nukes due to conventional superiority. C point, no healthcare internal link. They have zero evidence that government is going to increase spending on healthcare, even if the economy improves. D point, no disease internally. Command F the card. It closely gets is saying illnesses meaning people don't go to work, which has nothing to do with large-scale fatal pandemics. That their impact evidence is about it has no scenario for spreading across the entire. It has no evidence for it spreading across the entire globe. I'll flash this after. No disease extinction, even if Ebola only killed like 2,000 people. That's buried 17 pandemics. So I'd like to be causing extinction. Haters and emerging complaint animal chickens, 1500 less than 12% were disrupted infectious disease, known global disease first. Other infectious disease also read our species. Numerous global disease first and capable of highly rational sounds fair and like to be called by natural pandemic, highly lethal, passion being closed before they start their selective pressure for pathogens not to be highly lethal. Yeah, the pick. One piece of voting issue, they moved off offense with mining policy change, shifting dates and core literature towards the margin on money with topics, civic education, strategic offense, is that solve their offense. picks without solvency have to specifically or venue they kill questions they don't have to answer. Most of when you say we can't produce an answer, this is not literature. Neither of us have to defend our position against full research objections. They conceded 15 kiloton tactical nuclear weapons, which is what they said in CS kill hundreds of millions, which is 1 AC2 and prefer. Evidence is from PhDs who have a robust methodology, whereas their evidence is just the assertion of a random Indian general. It wouldn't be used on pigs. They conceded TNWs get pre-delegated to rogue commanders on the battlefield who would use them against Indian cities. There's no net benefit. If the right TNWs only kill 20 people, that means they don't serve as a deterrent. Their evidence about conventional war is just about why Pakistan thinks that they're valuable and Pakistan thinks they're a deterrent and is summarizing Pakistan's position, not making the claim it does. Trust me, I cut it. Ganguly flows out. TNWs are worse. Ganguly 14 increasing intensity. Pakistani military ball control local commanders block for dangerous tactical nuclear weapons could undermine more optimistically. There's no impact to the conventional wars outweighs stuff. Isn't about India or Pakistan. It's just broadly about technology, which means any risk of nuclear war or hundreds of millions of dying is sufficient to outweigh the net benefit. Permutation due to counterplan is not textually competitive. These are afterwards of the plan, which means the act can be part of a large world. Textuality is the most objective standard avoids arbitrary interpretations of functional competition.
You send out the card.
Yeah. Thank you.
Reading one new card. It's not really a new card. It's okay if I send in the body. Sorry. It's like real shit. Order will be advantage, counterplan, disad, pick, case. I'm dealing with this theory stuff first. Flowing.
Our interpretation is two conditional counterplans, one for processing content teaches us to think quickly and deal with overwhelming amounts of info. Most real two logical policy making when the plans by the counterplan doesn't logical purposes the plan still be worse than this quote. A kills instead of making forces argument choice would never have the rule. What obviously is logical is making the most portable and applicable skill to our lives and key critical thinking. Everyone has to make decisions. 3 key instruction considering all opportunity costs allows you have to survive in a free market of ideas for ideological flexibility. Content forces you have to defend their position against all angles. So there's one maturity class that each church D class and one consistent set of issues. Other rounds will solve one debater to just read their most viable argument each round rather than reading many. Air 2 our persuasion aspects focuses debate the 2 our essay answer theory and substance. Our interprets 2 content that's reasonable for you to handle. You literally covered all the positions with in-depth responses. Competing interprets of race and boundaries or debaters can always nitpick some minor flaw with interpretation or suggest marginal advantage even in the absence of actual abuse. Turn strategy, tactical choices outweighs forces one to recognize strategic interaction critical skill for practical defense because of inevitability of strategic opponents and negative needs flexibility access parameters debate can break numerous negatives for to adapt on class 1 is inevitable. You already kick out of disades and advantages to conditionality doesn't significantly harm class. So other standards outweigh 2 negative strategy controls the internal link to class and incentivizes the outside research about kind of plans to work well against the average causes in-depth rigorous research to frontline your app. The PICS debate. Counter-interpretation, inverse of their interpretation, aka we get picks one, that benefit one strat. I should have a pick for later entity strat, a layered entity strat that engages the app from multiple angles for an effective tuner away reversibility. You can break new apps which even which generics other forms of recurse fail since you can frontline them assuming picture and you can keep percentage of how they can interact directly with half offense. 2 real world policymakers are always faced with decisions to what degree to take an action. Then they may modify parts of all the time to find the best policy fix, create further incentive to research each part of the plan and solvency mechanism. 3 depth we get education on specific cases and how app policy would apply to them rather than nuclear arsenals generally. Depth outweighs ace better and know how to defend yourself on specificities rather than vaguely knowing in generality. Otherwise, it's never applicable. The interproper doesn't steal off ground. It just focuses the debate on the apt in one narrow question. You have numerous opportunities to generate offense against terms, perms, impact turns. Prefers efficiency on the ground. The alternative is an explosion of frivolous theory against positions that are good but hard to answer. If the pick does in fact steal all your offense, then it means you're bad at debate because you don't have uniqueness answers and uniqueness to your offense. You don't have a if you don't have a defensive capacity in India eliminating their arsenals, it means it's a bad app. We do get first we do have a solvency advocate for the counterplan. The Ahmed evidence is really specific on how Pakistan the Ahmed evidence and the first piece of evidence on case is really specific on how Pakistan needs this type of nuclear weapon to counter against India's conventional war capabilities and its key to deterrence. Even if it's not perfect, saying Pakistan should get rid of all of its nukes just accept this one type, it goes a very long way in saying that TMWs are a good form of nuclear weapon that Pakistan should maintain. It doesn't have to be perfect. Use reasonability. Good is good enough. Should return us to substance and read this better frivolous theory to pick proper. Kick the first advantage counterplan and I'll concede the middle link on the dissent. PIC solves the entirety of the case and doesn't link to net benefit. The counterpoint eliminates all Pakistan and India's nuclear weapons, but Pakistan gets to keep their tactical nuclear weapons to balance out India and Pakistan's conventional war deterrence capability. Solves India preemptive counterforce strikes because India doesn't have the weapon. Solves large-scale nuclear war via Kashmir tensions because equal deterrence capabilities means neither side invades and no nuclear war because no capability. Solves terrorist escalation and uneven conventional capabilities. So Pakistan possessing TNWs balances out, and terror attacks are minor and isolated to extremists who leaders dismiss. Solves the 5th, 6th, and 7th scenarios because they don't have large-scale nukes and no nuke subs either. Solves nuclear terror. Pakistan only has TNWs and can protect them so much better. And 1C Mizokami proves they have protection capabilities, which answers their stealing argument, the stealing dissat that they went for on the PIC. On the PIC solves miscalc. India doesn't have nukes, so Pakistan won't think they're getting first struck, and TNWs have extremely limited damage and are only used in conventional conflicts. Solves their nuclear subs argument as well because they don't have nuclear subs anymore. The PIC eliminates them. But the PIC rebalances India and Pakistan's conventional war capabilities to achieve Goldilocks deterrence levels. Pakistan has stated they will only use TNWs as a deterrent, not a weapon to destroy. TNWs fill the gap of Pakistan weapons deficits and reverse common India perception that their forces are superior. Their rogue commanders assumes local level commanders 1 attain the weapons and 2 will wind up in a situation where they have a justification to use them. But cross-apply the 1C evidence indicting their Pakistan nuclear terror because it specifically isolates how Pakistan has the capabilities. The people who are armed who protect the nuclear weapon, they can just move with them while they transport them to the battlefield. So they are stolen. A 15 kiloton weapon only kills hundreds of people, and they probably would be evacuated anyway. Their evidence assumes largely close, densely located populations that are very common in India. A strike to that population, but in the event of war, those situations they'd already be evacuated. They're strategic and primarily used to strike tanks, not destroy full populations. Full populations, that's Ahmed 16. I didn't put the citation because it's from the same card as in the 1NC. It's just a different part of the article. Analysis of Nasr missile. 1 kiloton weapon should destroy about 55 tanks. It takes her space at 100 meters apart. Proves it's only trying to strike tanks independently. Conventional war outweighs the case 1 time frame. Conventional wars would happen quickly because there's no checks in countries when fear retaliation, whereas India tensions take a while to play out. Tensions bounce slowly. Time frame outweighs further away their impact and decreases its probability magnitude. True probability is way more likely than nuclear war. Historical and empirical analysis proves turns the case. Nair evidence on the case proved Pakistan would only disarm given equal conventional war capabilities with India. I'll concede. I guess I'll continue a durable fiat argument for solvency for the counterpoint. 1C tomb ascends again assumes densely population. They're used to strike tanks. Minute argument. The tech outweighs argument. We solved the case. So it decreases the risk of nuclear war. So tech is the only impact and net benefit. It's not unique.
39. Condo. Everyone good?
One sec.
Conditionality is a voting issue versus argument development destroys affidavit incentives for argument development. Their model encourages nonsense, nervous options, and want to see and kick them, which destroys argument and responsibility, decreases the educational value of debate. They expand debates horizontally but not vertically, which matters because it link turns every argument they go for seconds clash. Their model debate destroys incentives for high quality clash and testing, splitting and already constrained one Air Force debaters in a short analytic instead of their debates means net codes for the argument, the least instead of their best arguments, which means you never get even the core debates in the topics here. Third is Dispo solves was not answered. It link turns strategic thinking and sufficiently solves negative flexibility to happy medium. You should crossfly sufficiently frame me to the counterplan here. Even if you don't think dispo doesn't solve all of their offense, it solves a sufficient amount, and they have not isolated what specific offense it doesn't solve, which means you should presume it's solved, but it links all their strategic thinking. The argument piece allows the winner to make strategic choices about what to straighten, while also making the 1 and C make strategic choices about what to put in the 1 and C and what to risk having offense on and being stuck with, which means it creates the best arguments. The line-to-line input processing is solved by dissets and solved by multiple rounds. The 1 and C is inevitably going to be 7 minutes, which means there's no reason counterplan is uniquely key to it, and it's solved outside of debate, where they conceded clash is the only impact that is intrinsic to individual debates, which also outweighs their real-world logic. For the sake of logic, doesn't matter. That would justify the negative. Being able to read infinite a priori is obviously clash and testing is a prior question to determine what the most logical option is, which proves we need to be able to adequately answer the counterplan for you to determine if it's the most logical option. There's no impact to real-world debate. It doesn't perfectly mimic it. That's why we use speech times, and we do things like spread, and we control the interlink. Because the only impact to real-world is being able to make logical decisions and have those decision-making skills, which only happens if we're able to have rigorous clash. After construction with link turn at the top, there's no reason counterplans are necessary to test from all angles, especially if that results in worse debates. Dissets are sufficiently able to solve their offense. Dispositional counterplans still means the affirmative has to strategically construct their advocacy to be able to answer a variety of different counterplans, and has to make strategic decisions about whether or not they want to make a permutation or stick the negative with the counterplan. Reasonability, it's arbitrary and vice the race to the bottom. They aren't reasonable. They read a 40-plank counterplan that had different planks that contradicted, and a pick that was directly contradictory with one of the planks within the original counterplan, because the first counterplan said eliminate T and W's, and the last counterplan was keep K and W's, which proves that it forces the affirmative not necessarily to debate ourselves in the one area, but it means we have to read solving steps to different things. It means we can't strategically extend different parts of our affirmative in the one area, which means it's definitely not reasonable in this specific instance. Their counterproof of 2 condos is completely arbitrary, because all of their offense would be justified by infinite condos key, which means you have to weigh the benefits of conditionality. 2 condo definitely still links to our offense, which means above, which means if we win our offense, it proves they're unreasonable. They don't link turn strats to these strategic interactions with answers at the top, even if the affirmative can break new begin in this instance, and if that would justify the negative having an exception to conditionality in that instance. Independently, there's no red line for how much independent new apps are able to provide. They didn't give a reason why new apps are good, which means you shouldn't evaluate it. It doesn't outweigh our clash offense, which is the biggest impact debate. You can kick it dissets only if there's defense on them, which is the same, which means it's the most logical way of evaluating arguments. These counterplans shouldn't be different than any other argument. The research counterplans was link turn at the top, because we never get the opportunity to deploy that research when the negative is able to go for the least covered counterplan, which means clash controls the link to all of their offense, and they drop dispo solves.